You might think your name was just a casual choice by your parents' attribute, a pleasing sound, or simply a preference. But according to the oldest teachings of Buddhism, the first letter of your name is not a coincidence, it's a spiritual code, a vibrational symbol that reveals hidden traits of your personality, your way of handling life, your cycles, and even the kind of energy you attract and project into the world. This isn't internet esotericism. It's ancestral wisdom that recognizes in the sound and shape of letters a frequency that directly influences your spiritual field. Imagine for a moment that your name wasn't chosen merely by human will, but rather as a kind of vibrational signal that connects you to what you need to live, learn, and overcome in this life. Have you ever noticed that certain patterns keep repeating in your life? Strange cycles, recurring feelings, situations that seem to follow you. What if all of this is, in some way, tied to the first letter of your name? It may seem subtle, but in the deepest spiritual traditions, the smallest details reveal the most. In this video, you'll understand how Buddhism interprets the energy behind the first letter of your name. You'll discover how this small detail carries powerful information about who you are, how you react, and even the kind of karma you came to work through. You'll understand why some situations just stick to your life, and why certain paths open more easily for some, and with more difficulty for others. All of this may be encoded in the first letter of your namya, kind of vibrational mirror of your soul. If you believe everything happens for a reason, that our lives are connected to an invisible order, then hit the like button now, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications to keep accessing content that reveals what no one ever told you. And tell me in the comments which city or country you're watching this video from. It's incredible to see how many people around the world are awakening to this silent truth. Your name speaks. And today, you'll finally learn to listen. What if I told you that there are patterns of behavior, emotional tendencies, spiritual gifts, and even blockages that are common among people with the same initial? It's not a coincidence, it's vibration. Letters aren't just symbols, they emit frequency. And that frequency directly affects your personal energy field, your magnetism, your way of thinking, feeling, and even manifesting. What seems like just a letter might actually be revealing the energetic matrix of your spiritual identity. This is deeper than any astrological chart. In Buddhism, a name is a personal mantra, a word that, when spoken, carries an intention, an echo that activates subconscious patterns. That's why understanding what your initial represents is the first step to comprehending why you experience certain highs and lows, why you attract certain types of people, and why some situations feel harder for you than for others. The initial letter is the tone of your vibrational field. And if you don't understand the tone you're emitting, it's hard to change the melody of your life. Here's the most curious part. You might have thought certain personality traits came from your upbringing, traumas, or environment. But what if in reality, those traits are just reflecting what your soul chose to vibrate from the start, through your initial letter? What if there are ways to reframe, balance, or even amplify that energy, simply by understanding what it truly means? Because by becoming aware of this, you're not just learning about letters, you're learning about yourself, about what builds you, and what can set you free. So, before diving into the explanation of each letter, I want to invite you to look at your name with new eyes. Not as something trivial, but as a spiritual mirror. And understand that the most powerful self-knowledge begins precisely with the details you've always ignored. The first letter of your name is a symbol, a code, a vibration. And from now on, you'll start seeing yourself with a clarity you may have never had before. Because when you understand what your name is saying, you finally begin to live who you truly are. Now that you understand how powerful your name is, let's discover the meaning of your initial and how it impacts your life. I invite you not only to look at your own initial, but also at those of your children, grandchildren, partner, friends. See how the energy of that letter says so much about that person. The letter A carries a powerful vibration of beginnings, momentum, and leadership. People whose names start with this letter are naturally tied to the idea of starting something new, forging paths, and making decisions. In the energetic field, A is connected to the inner flame, representing the spark of the spirit that seeks to manifest in the world with strength and direction. It's a letter of action, courage, and autonomia vibration that acts as a spiritual push for those who need to break free from stagnation. These people are often seen as guides, pioneers, or references even without realizing it. In personality, those with an A initial tend to have striking traits. They are decisive, independent, and have a presence that commands respect. They are natural leaders, often the first to take initiative in projects, groups, or relationships. However, this same drive can turn into impatience or authoritarianism when things don't happen on their desired timeline. There's a tendency toward perfectionism, excessive control, and difficulty accepting help. A vibrates with the strength of individuality, which can both empower and isolate. Spiritually, A represents the call to the soul's mission. It's as if these people were awakened earlier for their journey and carry an urgency to achieve, conquer, or leave a legacy. In Buddhism, this type of energy is tied to active dharma-living one's inner truth with courage and constant action. These are people who came to lead by example, but they need to learn to use that strength in a balanced way. When aligned, they become pure inspiration. When disconnected, they can be harsh even with themselves. The greatest karmic challenge of the letter A is knowing when to act and when to step back. It's learning that strength isn't just action, but also presence and wisdom, that true leadership doesn't impose, it inspires, and that the path isn't a race, but a journey of continuous evolution. When they understand this, those with this initial become true beacons not by shouting louder, but by shining with integrity and purpose. If this is your case, perhaps you were born to lead, but first, to lead yourself. The letter B carries a vibration focused on nurturing, care, and emotional connection. People whose names start with this letter have an essence that manifests gently, sensitively, and protectively. In the energetic field, B is tied to the frequency of emotional nourishment and energy that brings peace, security, and a desire to create stable environment. This initial vibrates like a spiritual embrace and often manifests in its bearers a desire to care, protect, and ensure the well-being of those around them. Not out of obligation, but because it's part of who they are. In personality, those with a B initial tend to be intuitive, patient, and empathetic. They sense the environment easily, pick up on unspoken feelings, and act discreetly but transformatively. They like seeing others well, even if it means sacrificing themselves. And here's the point of caution. The energy of B often attracts relationships where the person ends up giving too much and putting themselves second. They rarely ask for help but are always available to give it, and over time, this can drain their own energy. Spiritually, B is deeply connected to compassion and the karma of service. According to Buddhist teachings, these people came to the world to balance giving and receiving. They carry such a strong sense of emotional responsibility that they often feel guilty for setting boundaries. But that's precisely the lesson: to love without erasing themselves, to care without overloading. B vibrates as a spiritual guardian, someone who protects the home, friends, family, but needs to remember they also deserve protection. The greatest challenge of the letter B is not forgetting themselves. To understand that true love doesn't require depletion but balance. Those with this initial need to learn to say no without guilt, because self-care is also an act of love. When they find this balance, B-bearers become some of the most powerful and healing presences, people who transform quietly, who nurture without burden, and who love with a force that often heals even the unspoken. The letter C carries a vibrant energy of expression, creativity, and movement. People with this initial have a natural frequency geared toward communication, idea exchange, and sparking transformation through words, actions, or presence. C is like a spark of light that pulses in constant expansion, revealing talents that manifest artistically, intellectually, or socially. It's a letter that vibrates with enthusiasm, curiosity, and an almost uncontrollable urge to experience life intensely. When these people speak, their energy spreads through the environment, influencing everything around them. In personality, those with a C initial are often charismatic, dynamic, and captivating. They have an ease with expression not just verbally, but emotionally. They feel a need to share what they think, feel, and experience. They are restless, sometimes impulsive, with a mind that never stops. Creativity runs through their veins, but with it comes the risk of dispersion. Wanting to do everything, live everything, they often fail to finish anything. They need focus and direction, or they can get lost in 1,000 beginnings without a single end. Spiritually, C is tied to the Buddhist principle of impermanence. It's a letter that vibrates with the awareness that everything changes, everything flows and thus. These people have a deep connection to cycles, transitions, and new beginnings. They carry the mission to adapt without losing their essence and to develop the gift of spreading light through speech, whether through art, communication, teaching, or simply storytelling. Their greatest power lies in truth. When they speak from the heart, they touch souls. The greatest challenge for those with this letter is finding inner silence. In a noisy world and with an even noisier mind, these people need to learn that not every answer lies in doing, speaking, or acting. Sometimes, it's in observing, in breathing, in listening more than speaking. When they align their energy, sea bearers become channels of conscious expression, inspiring effortlessly, teaching without preaching, and transforming with their presence. They didn't come to the world to stay silent, but to learn to use their voice as an instrument of truth. The letter D carries a vibration of structure, discipline, and steadfast purpose. People with this initial tend to have a natural sense of responsibility and focus. While other letters represent impulse or emotion, D vibrates like a rock, stable, determined, and grounded. Those with this letter inspire confidence and convey a sense that they can handle it, even in the toughest moments. They don't shy away from struggle, don't give up easily, and have a constructive strength that manifests in both projects and relationships. In personality, D bearers are practical, objective, and resilient. They have a keen sense of justice, value well done work, and tend to act based on solid values. They are committed, often from a young age, and struggle to abandon what they've started, even if it no longer makes sense. Sometimes, this makes them inflexible, stuck in routines or relationships out of fear of failure. But what many don't understand is that these people aren't afraid of change. They're afraid of disappointing. Spiritually, D is tied to applied Dharma spiritual work done in daily life, in the details, in practice. According to Buddhism, these souls came to learn that evolution isn't just in big leaps, but in small, intentional steps. They are called to walk the path of consistent progress, building something lasting and true. Often they face trials tied to persistence. They are tested to their limits, as if life is forging their soul's strength in the fire of repetition and patience. The greatest challenge of D is knowing when to stop, when to let go, when to be flexible, when to recognize that not everything can or should be controlled. Rigidity, when excessive, becomes a prison. These people only find true freedom when they realize their strength isn't just in holding on, but in letting go of what no longer serves. When they find this balance between firmness and flow, they become builders of extraordinary realities, people capable of creating not just projects, but new versions of themselves. The letter E carries a vibration of expansion, freedom, and full expression. It's a light but powerful letter, representing the soul's drive toward the world. People whose names start with E are usually restless, exploratory, and open-minded. They can't stand feeling trapped, whether by a routine, an idea, or a relationship. E vibrates with a constant need to discover, experiment, and reinvent. It's as if the world is too small to contain everything they feel and think. And this is both their blessing and their challenge. In personality, those with an E initial are communicative, sociable, and full of ideas. They connect easily with people, adapt to new environments, and learn quickly. But behind this enthusiasm, there's also a spirit that gets lost easily, precisely because of so many possible directions. E loves new things but can become scattered. It loves freedom but sometimes fears commitment. Their mind moves so fast that their body and emotions don't always keep up. This often leads to cycles of excitement and frustration. Spiritually, E is deeply tied to the Buddhist law of impermanence. It's a constant reminder that everything changes, everything passes, and thus, E represents those who came to flow with life. They have the mission to live in the present, without attachment to the past or anxiety about the future. Their soul seeks expansion but needs inner anchors, or they risk drifting aimlessly. E is also a messenger. They have an ease with translating complex ideas into simple words, acting as a bridge between worlds spiritual and material, emotional and rational. The greatest challenge of those with this letter is learning to be fully present where they are, to understand that true freedom isn't in escaping but in staying, that real expansion comes not from the quantity of experiences but from their depth. When they find balance between the desire to soar and the wisdom to land, E becomes a vibrant, joyful, and inspiring force, someone who not only lives intensely, but inspires others to do the same. If your name starts with this letter, perhaps you didn't come to the world to stay still, but rather to show that movement can also be direction. The letter F carries a vibration of care, sensitivity, and connection to the purest feelings. It's a letter that's gentle in form but firm in essence. People whose names start with F often have a keen sense of justice, empathy, and truth. They can't ignore others' suffering, and often without realizing it, act as silent healers around them. This letter vibrates with the energy of altruistic love, harmony, and peace, but it also brings an emotional intensity that needs to be well channeled. F is like an energetic field sensitive to everything, absorbing vibrations, words, and even silences. In personality, those with an F initial tend to be loyal, generous, and deeply emotional. They give themselves fully to friendships, projects, loves, and expect the same in return. They have big hearts but can get hurt easily, especially when they realize they gave too much to someone who gave too little back. They're highly perceptive, sensing when something's off even if no one says anything. And they often blame themselves for not being able to save others. This excessive emotional responsibility can become a burden when they don't realize the world isn't theirs to fix. Spiritually, F vibrates with the energy of commitment to the collective good. In Buddhism, it's associated with the practice of compassionate love, the kind that acts without expecting reward, that understands suffering as part of the human journey and seeks to alleviate it with presence, listening, and nurturing. But this mission comes with a great lesson: to love without emptying themselves. People with F need to learn to set healthy, energetic boundaries, to say no when necessary, and to recognize that their light is only useful to others if they don't let it fade. The greatest challenge of F is freeing themselves from the need for validation. To understand that true love isn't measured by how much you endure, but by how much you respect yourself. These people need to learn that they aren't weak for feeling deeply, they're strong for continuing to feel despite so many falls. When they balance their giving with self-love, they become beacons of humanity, compassion, and presence. The world needs more people like those with Phi. These people also need to remember that sometimes the soul that most needs care is their own. The letter G vibrates with an energy of practical wisdom, silent depth, and visionary insight. Those born with this initial carry an analytical yet intuitive mind, the kind of person who sees beyond the surface, but prefers not to say everything they perceive. G's energy is tied to the pursuit of real knowledge, the kind that transforms, organizes, and directs life with purpose. These people are naturally inclined towards study, observation, and understanding how things work at their core. They tend to be reserved, but when they speak, they bring truths that change how others see reality. In personality, G represents someone curious, disciplined, and often perfectionistic. They aren't satisfied with shallow answers, enjoying investigating, testing, confirming. They learn easily, but prefer the silence of analysis to the noise of baseless opinions. They may seem cold or distant, but in reality, they're intensely absorbing the world with care. The challenge here lies in excessive control, wanting everything to be in its place. G-bearers can become rigid, overly self-critical, and even emotionally blocked. The mind is their greatest strength, and sometimes their prison. Spiritually, G is tied to the pursuit of inner truth. In Buddhism, this letter represents the path of active wisdom, the kind that doesn't just know, but applies knowledge in daily life. It's an energy of deepening, of slow and solid growth. These people came to evolve consciously, but also to teach, even if they don't see themselves as teachers. Their silent mission is to open mental and spiritual paths for others. The great lesson is balancing mind and heart, reason and intuition, logic and faith. Life asks them to feel as much as they think. The greatest challenge of G is letting go of control and trusting the invisible. Those with this initial need to learn that not everything can or should be understood before it's lived. That some truths aren't in books but in emotions, and that the greatest wisdom isn't knowing everything but knowing where peace lies. When G finds this balance, it becomes a true beacon of clarity, someone who unites knowledge, sensitivity, and purpose in a rare way. If your name starts with G, perhaps your mission is less about speaking and more about showing, with silence and coherence, how truth can be simple and transformative. The letter H vibrates with an energy of self-mastery, strategy, and inner balance. People whose names start with H tend to be discreet, meticulous, and determined. They don't like to expose themselves too much, but observe everything. They're the type who quietly arrives and, before you know it, has organized everything around them. H represents silent strength, the kind that doesn't need to prove anything but is always in control. It's an energy tied to emotional intelligence, patience, and building a solid path, even if to others it seems slow or invisible. In personality, those with an H initial are often reserved, focused, and deeply committed to what they believe in. They value order, logic, and stability. They like to plan, anticipate risks, avoid mistakes. They prefer a secure step over chasing impulses. However, this pursuit of control can be both their fortress and their prison. Those who try to predict everything often close themselves off to the unpredictable, and that's where life resides. H needs to learn that failing is also part of growth and that lowering their guard occasionally doesn't diminish their value. Spiritually, H is tied to the Buddhist idea of the middle way, the path of balance between excess and scarcity. These people have a clear mission to master themselves, to influence the world around them with wisdom. They are called to develop discipline, yes, but also compassion. H's energy demands aligning action and contemplation, reason and empathy. Their spirituality isn't made of grand rituals or extravagant beliefs, but of small, conscious daily practices. They are old souls who've learned that true strength isn't visible, it's felt in their presence. The greatest challenge of those with H is allowing themselves to feel more, trust more, give more. Not everything can be predicted, protected, or controlled. And in that surrender lies great power, activated only when the person allows themselves to be vulnerable. When this balance is achieved, H becomes truly transformative, a silent leader, a mentor who teaches without raising their voice, a guardian of solid values. If your name starts with this letter, perhaps life is showing you that your strength isn't in resisting chaos but in maintaining peace within it. The letter I carries a vibration of clarity, focus, and the pursuit of inner truth. It's a straight, direct letter, without curves, and this symbolism reflects in those with this initial. They seek to get to the point, prefer honesty over illusion, and value simplicity with an almost spiritual intensity. I's energy vibrates with the light of consciousness, like an inner beacon guiding their choices and keeping them away from chaos. Those with this letter tend to have an objective, practical mind, but are also highly sensitive to disorganized environments or inconsistent people. They sense when something is out of alignment. In personality, people with I initials are analytical, detail-oriented, and perfectionistic. They like doing things well, can't stand superficiality, and hate waste whether of time, words, or energy. They learn easily, but only feel comfortable when they deeply understand what they're doing. On the other hand, this pursuit of perfection can become a burden. They demand too much of themselves and others, often suffering silently for feeling they're not good enough. The biggest mistake I bearers make is believing they need to always be right to be accepted. Spiritually, I represents the principle of enlightenment through discipline. In Buddhism, this energy is tied to mental clarity, constant practice, and the simplicity of the straight path, no detours, no artifices. Those born with this vibration are called to see beyond appearances and develop a spirituality based on truth, not comforting illusions. I demands courage to see what others avoid, to face oneself honestly, and, above all, to not get lost in the rigidity of the mind. These people have the gift of bringing light where there's confusion, but must first overcome the confusion within themselves. The greatest challenge of I is accepting that not everything needs to be perfect to have value, that life doesn't demand perfection but presence, that you don't need all the answers to walk with faith. When this balance is achieved, these people become true channels of light-wise, clear, and reliable. If your name starts with I, perhaps your mission is to show that truth does set you free, but compassion for your own mistakes is what allows you to keep evolving. Your gift is to illuminate, but your greatest power lies in learning to shine without burning out trying to be right all the time. The letter J carries an energy of initiative, courage, and expansion. It vibrates with movement, a zest for life, and the drive to achieve something greater. People whose names start with J are often seen as natural leaders, even if they don't intend to be. They take the lead, aren't intimidated by the unknown, and have an inner strength that inspires those around them. J's vibration is tied to the adventurous spirit and trust in the path, even when it's not yet clear. This letter represents the call to forge paths both in practical life and the spiritual journey. In personality, J marks people who are optimistic, bold, and determined. They dive into challenges with enthusiasm, believing they'll figure it out, that it'll work, that everything will fall into place. This faith in the future makes them magnetic, but can also lead to impulsivity. They often act before thinking and only later realize the consequences. Another key point. As action-oriented people, they tend to carry the world on their shoulders, taking on too many responsibilities. The challenge here is learning to balance this urge to make everything happen with moments of pause, reflection, and self-care. Spiritually, J is tied to trust in Dharma's path of truth and purpose, according to Buddhism. These people are called to lead by example, showing it's possible to act with courage without losing ethics, sensitivity, or a sense of community. They are pioneering souls who came to start cycles, break patterns, and inspire others to do the same. However, Jay's deepest lesson is learning to wait, to understand that life's timing isn't always the same as their desires, and that there's a greater wisdom guiding everything, even the moments when nothing seems to be happening. The greatest challenge of Jay is accepting that not everything depends on immediate action. That true power sometimes lies in observing, silencing, and letting the universe work too. When this balance is achieved, these people become guardians of new possibilities, opening doors not just for themselves but for everyone around them. If your name starts with J, perhaps your mission is to remind the world that courage isn't the absence of fear, it's moving forward despite it. And that leading isn't about commanding but inspiring with truth, humility, and an open heart. The letter K vibrates with an energy of boldness, originality, and transformation. It's one of the rarest letters to start a name, and for that reason, it carries a unique strength. People whose names start with K generally don't follow the traditional path. They have a visionary mind and sharp intuition that lets them see opportunities where others see none. This energy is deeply tied to innovation, breaking patterns, and the courage to create a new path even when the old one still stands. K didn't come to repeat stories. It came to write a new one. In personality, K represents intense, determined, and highly independent individuals. They aren't satisfied with little and rarely accept living a life without meaning. They need to feel they're building something greater, something impactful. This ambition, however, can come with impatience. K-bearers want quick results and can easily get frustrated with delays, slowness, or lack of recognition. Another challenge is their tendency toward extreme self-sufficiency, believing they can only count on themselves, which can lead to emotional isolation or difficulty asking for help. Spiritually, K is tied to the Buddhist concept of right effort, the ability to direct energy toward what truly matters. This letter carries the gift of manifestation, purposeful achievement, and natural leadership. People with this vibration are called to inspire by example, but must be careful not to become prisoners of control. K has the potential to transform itself and the world, but only reaches its fullness when it learns that acting with intention is more valuable than acting in haste. Their spiritual journey is about aligning their inner strength with universal wisdom. The greatest challenge of K is understanding that not every revolution needs to be loud. That sometimes, transformation means transforming oneself first. When this balance between action and consciousness is achieved, K becomes a rare energy, a catalyst for positive change, someone who challenges the system not out of rebellion but wisdom. If your name starts with this letter, perhaps your mission is to show that being different isn't a burden, it's a gift, and that your soul was made to break limits, as long as those limits aren't those of your own heart. The letter L vibrates with an energy of love, harmony, and sensitivity. It carries a subtle but powerful frequency, like a breeze that seems light but has the strength to change the entire atmosphere around it. People whose names start with L are generally perceived as welcoming, peaceful, and highly empathetic. They have a natural gift for creating safe, comfortable environments where others feel free to be themselves. L is the energy of connection, listening, and care. And though these people are often discreet, their presence is felt like a balm, silent healing. In personality, L is tied to kindness, patience, and generosity. People with this initial tend to put others first, which can be a virtue but also a challenge. In their pursuit of peace, they often avoid conflict, bottle up their feelings, and diminish themselves to maintain balance. They may seem calm on the outside, but carry internal battles they rarely share. The biggest mistake L makes is believing they'll only be loved if they're always understanding. This leads them to silence their own needs for the sake of harmonia choice that, over time, can breed resentment and emotional exhaustion. Spiritually, L is deeply tied to the Buddhist teaching of interdependence, the understanding that everything is connected and that our actions, words, and thoughts ripple into the collective. Those with this letter are called to live with conscious compassion, not just being kind to others, but learning to be kind to themselves. Their mission is to build bridges between people, ideas, different worlds without losing themselves in others' path. They were made to love, but they need to learn that the most transformative love comes from self-respect. The greatest challenge of L is learning to say no without guilt and to prioritize themselves without feeling selfish. When this balance is achieved, these people become true emotional pillars, beings who heal just by being present, who bring calm amidst chaos, and who inspire others to live with more lightness and awareness. If your name starts with L, perhaps your mission in this life is to remind others that love isn't just giving, it's also setting boundaries, it's also strength, and that being a light for the world doesn't mean dimming your own flame, but fueling it every day with care, truth, and presence. The letter M carries a vibration of stability, protection, and emotional strength. Its shape resembles a solid foundation, like steady mountains that support everything around them, and that's exactly the energy it represents. People with names starting with M are often emotional anchors for others. They're the ones who hold things together, solve problems, care, and protect. But this strength isn't always recognized as it should be, because those with M often don't talk about what they feel, they just do. And behind this silent giving lies a deeply sensitive soul. In personality, M represents practical, resilient, and loyal people. They have a realistic view of life, value the small things, and carry a wisdom that doesn't come from books, it comes from experience. They can stay calm in tough situations and almost always make decisions with their feet on the ground. However, this strength hides a challenge, the fear of seeming weak. Those with M often pile on responsibilities to the limit, fearing they'll disappoint. In doing so, they forget to care for themselves, to rest, to ask for help. They carry everything alone, including the weight of emotions they don't express. Spiritually, M is tied to the energy of the Universal Mother, the one who nurtures, protects, and sustains. In Buddhism, this vibration is associated with the earth, the inner home, the building of peace within oneself. People with this initial have a clear mission, to create security without losing lightness. They are called to build, but also to learn to trust life's flow. Because M's great lesson is that not everything needs to be under control all the time. True strength lies not just in resisting, but in knowing how to let go. In trusting that the world won't collapse just because you decided to rest. The greatest challenge of those with names starting with M is understanding that caring for themselves isn't selfishness, it's emotional survival. These people have the gift of turning chaos into order. But they need to remember to make their own hearts a space of nurturing too. When this balance is achieved, M becomes a symbol of emotional wisdom, someone who cares without forgetting themselves, who loves without erasing themselves, who leads with tenderness and firmness. If this is your initial, perhaps your mission is to learn to be your own safe harbor before trying to save the world around you. The letter N carries an energy of freedom, movement, and reinvention. It vibrates with creative restlessness like a wind that blows in multiple directions and refuses to be confined. People with names starting with N have a naturally exploratory soul. They aren't satisfied with ready-made answers, always questioning, seeking new paths, and reinventing their own beliefs. This vibration is tied to autonomy, curiosity, and constant transformation. These are people who came to the world to experience life in all its forms and don't accept living halfway. In personality, N represents versatile, creative, and independent individuals. They learn quickly, adapt easily, and always have a new idea in mind. But with this fast-paced energy comes the challenge of instability. These people can start many projects and finish none. They jump from idea to idea, emotion to emotion, and sometimes get lost in their own mental whirlwind. The restless mind can be a gift, but also a silent saboteur. That's why those with N need to learn to maintain focus without giving up their free nature. Spiritually, N is connected to the Buddhist concept of impermanence, the wisdom that everything in life changes, and suffering comes from trying to hold on to what's already passing. People with this initial have a special connection to life cycles, but need to learn to live the present more deeply. Often they're so busy planning the next step that they forget to live the now. N's spiritual mission is finding balance between freedom and commitment not to external rules, but to their own essence. The greatest challenge of those with N is turning movement into direction, because freedom without purpose becomes flight. But when they find the why behind everything, these people become inexhaustible sources of inspiration. They are visionaries, creators, transformers. If this is your letter, perhaps your journey is to discover that you don't need to choose between freedom and depth because it's possible to live lightly and still have roots. And when that happens, N becomes an energy that lights paths, not just for itself, but for everyone around. The letter O vibrates with the energy of wholeness, the complete cycle, the harmony between beginning, middle, and end. Its circular shape symbolizes this: a return to the origin, a continuous movement of learning, growth, and renewal. People whose names start with O tend to seek meaning and balance in everything they do. They aren't the type to settle for shallow answers or a life lived on autopilot. They want to understand, to feel, to build something solid, whether a career, a relationship, or a greater purpose. And this deep pursuit is what makes them so unique. In personality, O represents organization, reliability, and practical wisdom. These people value order, well-done results, and have an impressive ability to solve problems. While other letters vibrate with impulsivity or emotion, O acts with strategy. But beware. Behind this focused, centered profile lies a certain rigidity. People with this initial can be resistant to change, struggle with the unexpected, and feel anxious when things deviate from their plans. They like to be in control, and life, as we know, doesn't always comply. Spiritually, O is tied to the Buddhist teaching of interdependence and the balance of opposites. This letter reminds us that everything is connected and that there's no light without shadow, action without pause, giving without receiving. People with this vibration are called to harmonize the internal with the external, routine with intuition, control with surrender. They have a natural talent for organizing chaos, but they need to learn to live chaos when necessary. Sometimes, true balance lies in accepting temporary imbalance so a new order can emerge. The greatest challenge of O is flexibility, understanding that it's not possible to control everything and that true power lies in adapting with intelligence. When this understanding is reached, O ceases to be just a letter of structure and becomes a symbol of wisdom. Those with this letter have the gift of bringing clarity amidst confusion, caring with firmness, and inspiring others to find stability within themselves. If this is your case, perhaps your mission in this life is to teach that balance isn't rigidity, it's presence, and that true peace comes from within. The letter P vibrates with the energy of introspection, purpose, and silent depth. People whose names start with this letter tend to be observant, analytical, and driven by an almost instinctive need to understand things on a deeper level than most. They aren't satisfied with superficialities. They need to understand the why behind every step, every choice, every emotion. This energy makes P-bearers a kind of silent seeker, someone who doesn't reveal themselves casually but is constantly immersed in internal reflections. In personality, P represents mental organization, sharp logic, and a strong sense of purpose. These people love planning, clear goals, and well-defined paths. They rarely act on impulse. They prefer to analyze, think, weigh pros, and consand only then act. This makes them highly effective, but can also lead to excessive rationality. Those with this initial can fall into the trap of thinking too much and feeling too little, or waiting so long for the perfect moment that they end up not living the present. Perfectionism and internal pressure are constant companions. Spiritually, P is tied to the Buddhist concept of mindful awareness, the cultivation of full consciousness in everything one does. This letter invites us to develop presence, to stop living on autopilot, and to see the beauty in details. People with this vibration carry a deep, often silent wisdom that only blossoms when they connect with their essence without haste. The great lesson is making room for intuition, balancing the logical mind with the sensitive heart, It's not necessary to understand everything to trust the journey. The greatest challenge of those with names, starting with P, is letting go of control over outcomes. These people have a strong tendency to want to ensure everything happens the right way, which can lead to frustration when things go off plan. But when they learn to walk lightly without losing their depth, they become masters of building with consciousness. If this is your letter, perhaps your mission in this life is to show the world that living with purpose isn't living with rigidity, it's living with presence, truth, and intention. And that, in today's world, is a true gift. The letter Q is one of the rarest in the alphabet and not by chance. It carries a unique, introspective, and mysterious vibration. People whose names start with Q are often misunderstood by many but highly connected to the invisible. They tend to have original ideas, deep thoughts, and a worldview that defies the ordinary. They are naturally analytical, intuitive, and carry an inner restlessness that drives them to seek answers where few dare to look. They live in a state of questioning, and it's precisely in this constant search that their strength lies. In personality, Q represents strategic intelligence, critical vision, and observant behavior. These people are great at detecting patterns, predicting consequences, and finding non-obvious solutions to complex problems. They think outside the box but with structure. They aren't impulsive, they're silently strategic. However, this excess of thinking can become a burden. Q has a tendency toward extreme self-analysis, which can lead to constant doubts, paralyzing decisions out of fear of making mistakes. Another point is that, being reserved, these people often feel isolated, as if no one truly understands them. Spiritually, Q is tied to the path of deep wisdom and awakening through silence. In Buddhism, this connects to contemplative meditation, the kind that doesn't seek immediate answers but observes the whole. Those vibrating with this letter have a natural connection to the invisible, to life's hidden symbols, and often have vivid dreams, strong intuitions, and perceptions beyond the ordinary. Their spiritual lesson is to trust their sensitivity more and rely less on the need for proof. Often, the universe speaks to cues subtly through signs, coincidences, premonitions. The secret is not ignoring these calls. The greatest challenge of Q is not getting lost in themselves. Because they think so much, these people tend to live more in their inner world than the outer one. But when they balance introspection with action, they become true Oracle's natural advisors, soul strategists. If this is your letter, perhaps you feel you don't fit in many places. But that's not a flaw, it's your calling. You came to the world to see what others don't, and to help guide paths with your unique vision. Embrace this gift. The world needs those who see with depth even if, often, in silence. The letter R carries an intense, restless, and transformative energy. It vibrates with movement, a desire for change, and the raw power of action. People with names starting with R rarely go unnoticed. They have a strong presence, an energy that captivates but can also be overwhelming when unregulated. They are those who can't stand stagnation, they need to evolve, learn, reinvent. Being still is synonymous with suffering for them. Their lives are often marked by cycles of rupture and rebirth, as if they constantly need to break something to rebuild it stronger. In personality, R reveals someone determined, ambitious, and creative. They are natural leaders but with a warrior's soul. Nothing came easy, and even when things seem fine, these people keep wanting more, seeking the next level, the next version of themselves. This strength, however, has a dark side: impatience. Those with R can be easily frustrated by slowness, routine, or lack of quick results. They also tend to be hard on themselves, blaming themselves for every failure as if it were a personal defeat. This self-criticism needs healing, or R's power becomes a burden. Spiritually, R is tied to the Buddhist concept of accepting life's flow. R needs to learn to flow like a river with strength, yes, but without fighting everything. The great lesson is understanding that not every transformation needs to come from pain or effort. Sometimes, true change happens in silence, in observation, in patience. People with this letter are called to master the art of balancing, doing and allowing, acting and trusting. And when they find this harmony, they become true forces of nature, healers, inspirers, spiritual leaders without even realizing it. The greatest challenge of those with names starting with R is slowing down without feeling guilty. Learning that value isn't just in productivity, but in the consciousness with which each moment is lived. If this is your letter, you've probably gone through tough phases that demanded resilience. And guess what? You got through them all. You have a rare strength, but now your path is learning to use that strength with lightness. Because when R finds peace, it stops being an uncontrolled explosion and becomes a beacon. Strong, present, and capable of transforming not just their own life, but those around them too. The letter S carries a vibration of silent wisdom and spiritual depth. It's a letter that brings the weight of knowledge, intuition, and sensitivity. People with names starting with S are generally far more perceptive than they show. They sense the environment, pick up on others' moods, and often know when something's wrong without anyone saying a word. They are naturally connected to the invisible, to what isn't seen but felt. That's why many S's feel different from an early age, as if they carry a kind of truth others haven't yet understood. In personality, S represents someone reflective, calm, and observant. They listen more than they speak, and when they do speak, they say exactly what needs to be said. Their presence is tranquil but never passive. S thinks deeply before acting, making them strategic, wise, and often visionary. But all this depth can also be a burden. Many S's carry old pains they don't share with anyone. They keep everything to themselves, which can lead to isolation, silent sadness, and a constant feeling of being emotionally overwhelmed. Spiritually, S is tied to the Buddhist ideas of karma and serenity. This letter represents a spirit seeking balance between what it feels and expresses, what it receives and gives. People with this vibration have a spiritual mission tied to harmony. They are like bridges between worlds, material and spiritual, rational and intuitive. S's energy is highly sensitive and needs environments and relationships that respect its depth. When S finds itself in noisy, superficial, or chaotic places, its energy conflicts, and it shuts down as if dimming its own light to protect itself. The greatest challenge of those with this initial is learning to open up without fear, to trust that their sensitivity isn't weakness, it's a gift. When S understands this and starts sharing their vision, feelings, and intuition, they become a true guide for others. If this is your letter, perhaps you felt you hold a lot inside. Maybe you think no one would understand. But the truth is, the world needs your calm, your depth, your wisdom. You didn't come to be invisible, you came to be a light where many see only shadow. And that mission is sacred. The letter T vibrates with an energy of balance, responsibility, and structure. It represents a force that sustains, organizes, and connects extremes to keep everything standing. People whose names start with T are often seen as pillars of support in their families, friendships, and workplaces. They are those others naturally trust. Even if they're exhausted inside, they stay firm because they feel they have a greater role to fulfill. This sense of having to handle it follows many T's from an early age, as if they were born with a greater sense of duty than others. In personality, T brings traits of loyalty, focus, and emotional discipline. These people like to plan, see concrete results, and feel useful. They rarely make impulsive decisions. They think, calculate, and then act. And once they commit to something or someone, they see it through. The hard part is that they often put others above themselves. They live to care, help, sustain, and often forget to listen to themselves, to prioritize themselves. This neglect can lead to emotional exhaustion, silent frustrations, and a sadness no one notices. Spiritually, T is tied to the path of Dharma in Buddhism, the path of service with consciousness. It's not just helping for the sake of helping, but understanding that serving also requires balance. T has a mission to unite, heal, and maintain order. But the true challenge is not forgetting themselves in this process. T's energy demands learning to say no, having the courage to refuse what hurts, even if it feels selfish. T needs to remember that being support doesn't mean erasing themselves. Their light shines brightest when they're whole and not just when they're holding others up. If this is your letter, perhaps you felt you carry the world on your shoulders. Maybe you've been the foundation for many, but rarely had someone do that for you. And that's okay. This is a noble energy, but it needs care. T is an archetype of bridge building, connecting people, ideas, paths. But it also needs time for itself, to breathe, to remember it deserves care too. When it finds this balance between giving and receiving, T becomes a powerful source of harmony and wisdom, and the world needs exactly that. The letter U vibrates with an energy of nurturing, empathy, and emotional connection. People with names starting with this letter have a natural gift for uniting, healing, and inspiring. They enter a space and, without saying much, create a sense of comfort. They have a fluid, adaptable energy that molds to circumstances and nurtures others with sincerity. It's as if they carry a silent kind of love, expressed more through actions than words. That's why they're often the ones people turn to in tough times, because they know how to listen without judging, support without demanding. In personality, U represents resilience, optimism, and generosity. These people, even after tough situations, maintain a hopeful view of life. They make friends easily, handle public interactions well, and excel at teaching and inspiring. However, this capacity for giving can become a problem when there are no clear boundaries. People with this letter often give too much, get involved in others' problems, and absorb pains that aren't theirs. This can lead to emotional exhaustion, frustration, and even psychosomatic illnesses. Yu's challenge is precisely this: to give without emptying themselves. Spiritually, Yu is deeply tied to the Buddhist idea of interdependence, the understanding that everything is connected and that our actions, emotions, and words impact the whole. Those vibrating with this letter have a clear mission: to help raise the vibration of their environment and the people around them. But they also need to learn that true connection is only possible when there's balance between giving and receiving. Yu needs to care for its own energy with the same tenderness it offers others, learning that saying no is also an act of love, especially toward themselves. If this is your letter, perhaps you felt overwhelmed by wanting to help everyone, even when you were broken inside. Maybe you've smiled on the outside, even on painful days, just to keep the peace around you. But now is the time to look inward and understand that your sensitivity is a sacred gift, not a burden. You came to the world to inspire, to heal, to unite, but that mission starts with you. The more you nurture yourself, the more you can overflow to others. And the world needs your light, but first, you need to see that it's already within you. The letter V carries an energy of inner strength, overcoming, and constant transformation. People with names starting with this letter tend to live lives marked by intense highs and lows, not because the universe punishes them, but because they have the capacity to reinvent themselves. They are like bamboo. They bend with the wind of difficulties, but don't break. V's energy is like a mountain, firm, determined, silently powerful. These people face trials from an early age, and even when everything says to stop, they keep going. They weren't born to live easily, but to conquer the impossible. In personality, V reveals someone focused, courageous, and highly disciplined. They set goals and don't rest until they achieve them. They have a clear vision of what they want and are capable of sacrificing much to reach their objective. But this strength can turn into rigidity. Often, those with V are too hard on themselves, isolate themselves out of pride, and carry the world's weight without asking for help. There's a tendency to control everything, to always want to predict the next step. This generates anxiety, frustration, and even insomnia because V wants to stay one step ahead of pain but sometimes just needs to allow themselves to feel. Spiritually, V is tied to the Buddhist concept of karmic liberation. This letter represents people who came to Earth to break family, social, or spiritual patterns. They are strong souls with the mission to end cycle sand. That's why they face so many tests. But V's lesson is clear. You don't need to carry everything alone. Learning to trust, to let go, to flow is essential. V's true power lies in turning pain into wisdom, frustration into faith, and rigidity into consciousness. When this happens, these people become true beacons, inspiring others through example, not words. If this is your letter, perhaps you've felt tired, as if you're always fighting against the tide. Maybe you think everything is harder, slower, more intense for you. And you know what? It's true. But it's also true that you have a strength few possess. You're not here by chance, you're an instrument of transformation. Every scar you carry tells a story, and every overcoming is a seed that inspires someone. Don't lose faith in yourself. You're not just strong, you're necessary. And when you embrace your journey with courage and consciousness, the world around you changes with you. The letter W vibrates with an energy of movement, versatility, and constant transformation. People with names starting with this letter generally can't stand stagnation. They feel an inner restlessness that's hard to explain, as if they were born to discover new paths, challenge patterns, and change everything around them. Their lives tend to be intense, full of distinct phases, plot twists, and discoveries that shape their identity little by little. W is always seeking something more, not necessarily out of dissatisfaction, but because they know they were born to live beyond the obvious. In personality, W reflects curious, communicative, and highly adaptable individuals. They shine in conversations, learn quickly, make friends easily, and always have a different idea to share. They are restless in the best sense of the word, living with an accelerated mind, seeking new experiences, new learnings, new possibilities. The shadow side is difficulty with focus. They often start multiple projects and finish none. They feel anxious when tied to rigid routines and can get frustrated when their efforts don't yield immediate results. Spiritually, W is tied to the Buddhist concept of impermanence, the idea that everything is always changing. People with this letter have the gift of handling change, reinventing themselves, and inspiring others to let go of fear of the new. However, W's spiritual challenge is finding stability within change. This means cultivating a strong inner center to avoid getting lost in their own quest. When W learns to unite its creative energy with consistency, it becomes an unstoppable force capable of building legacies and deeply impacting those around them. If this is your letter, perhaps you've felt you're always in transition. Maybe you struggle to find yourself or explain who you are because, in truth, you're in constant construction. And that's not a flaw, it's a gift. You carry the ability to reinvent yourself as many times as needed, and that's rare. But remember, freedom without direction is confusion. Use your sensitivity, intelligence, and thirst for change to build something with purpose. The world needs your boldness, but above all, you need to trust that your path is unique and powerful. The letter X carries a mysterious, magnetic, and transformative energy. It's rare, and for that reason, it has a unique vibration. People whose names start with X generally have a striking presence, even if they don't speak much. It's as if they have a different energy field that draws looks, curiosity, and even silent admiration. X symbolizes crossroads, the point where paths meet, where important decisions are made. Those vibrating with this letter have a strong mission to provoke change, question patterns, shake structures wherever they go. In personality, X reveals someone intuitive, bold, and often misunderstood. They don't follow the common path and they shouldn't. They see what others don't, feel what others ignore, and often have ideas far ahead of their time. This can lead to insecurity or isolation, as they're not always well understood. But when they trust their intuition and embrace their uniqueness, they become leaders of new cycles, pioneers of the invisible, of what's yet to come. Their lives are rarely linear because they didn't come to live the ordinary. Spiritually, X is tied to transcendence and deep transformation. In Buddhism, this letter can be seen as the intersection between the material and the spiritual. Those born under this vibration are called to go through crises not to suffer, but to be refined. It's as if every pain, every challenge, is a key to accessing deeper levels of consciousness. But this process demands courage. Courage to truly see themselves, to accept their own shadow, and from there, to be reborn stronger, more whole, and more awake. That's X's journey, diving deep to emerge lighter. If this is your letter, perhaps you've never felt normal. Maybe you've spent your life trying to fit in, not realizing that your true power lies in being different. X is the turning point, the symbol of reinvention, the call to live with purpose. You're not here by chance. Your energy is rare and therefore challenges the world around you. But when you stop asking for permission to exist and start owning your space with truth, everything changes. The world needs your vision, your courage, your transformation. And now, more than ever, it's time to accept who you are without fear of shining differently. The letter Y carries a dual, introspective, and deeply strategic energy. It represents a fork in the road, two possible directions, two paths constantly under analysis. People with names starting with Y tend to have highly active minds, always pondering, observing, choosing carefully. But what many don't realize is that this hesitation isn't indecision, it's wisdom in the making. Y represents the pursuit of a true path, not just any path. And for this reason, those with this letter often have a slower but much deeper and transformative maturing process. In personality, Y shows careful, analytical individuals with a strong sense of emotional responsibility. They feel the weight of every choice and fear, making mistakes not out of insecurity, but because they know every decision has consequences. They are natural strategists, thinking before acting, studying before opining, and generally disliking improvisation. Their challenge lies in avoiding excessive rationality. When too caught up in logic, they can disconnect from the heart, becoming cold or distant, even when inside they crave only security and understanding. Spiritually, Y is tied to the Buddhist concept of silent wisdom. This letter invites meditation, contemplation, and inner listening. Those vibrating with Y are called to find clarity amidst chaos, and this is only possible when they learn to silence external noise. They have the gift of seeing beyond appearances, but only when they trust their intuition more than numbers, rules, or guarantees. Y is the symbol of the spiritual turning point, the moment when one realizes control is illusory and true strength lies in accepting and flowing. If this is your letter, perhaps you constantly feel like you're analyzing everything people, situations, even yourself. Maybe you feel you need to have everything under control before taking the next step. But what if I told you your greatest strength lies in letting go of certainty? That the peace you seek won't come when everything makes sense, but when you accept that life doesn't need to be perfect to be sacred. You came to the world with a sharp mind and a deep soul, but you need to allow yourself to live, to err, to learn, to trust the journey more than the destination. Why is that? The courage to choose even without guarantees. The letter Z carries the energy of endings and new beginnings. As the last letter of the alphabet, it symbolizes the closure of cycles, wisdom gained over time, and preparation for a new stage of life. People with names starting with Z tend to have a strong presence, as if they've seen much, lived much, and carry a rare consciousness within them. It's not an energy of haste, but of depth. They are those who speak little but say everything, who often stay on the sidelines, observing, and at the right moment show they were ahead all along. In personality, Z reveals serious, practical, and highly intuitive individuals. They don't get lost in distractions. They know how to prioritize, make tough decisions, and are greatly respected for their steadfastness. However, this same steadfastness can be mistaken for coldness. Z tends to bottle up emotions, show little, and protect themselves behind a rational facade. But inside, there's a sensitive soul that absorbs everything around it and needs safe spaces to express itself. When they learn to trust others more, these people access a lightness that completely transforms their journey. Spiritually, Z is tied to the concepts of impermanence and karmic liberation. In Buddhism, this letter represents the ability to let go of what no longer serves, to learn from the past, and to move forward without attachment. These are souls that have gone through many trials, perhaps in past lives, and thus carry a more mature perspective on existence. They understand that everything has its time, and so they don't despair over loss or get swayed by empty promises. Z's spiritual challenge is finding balance between firmness and compassion, control and surrender. If this is your letter, perhaps you've felt a bit apart from the world. Maybe you've been called different, distant, or even difficult. But all this comes from a much greater truth. You're not here to repeat patterns, you're here to end them. You are the final point of many cycles that have caused pain in past generations. And that's why your soul is strong, your mind is focused, and your presence transforms. But remember, even Z, upon reaching the end, gives way to a new beginning. Allow yourself to live with more lightness, more love, more openness. Your mission is profound, but it can also be luminous. Before we wrap up this journey through the letters, there's something essential you need to understand. Even if two people share the same initial letter, the impact of that energy will never be exactly the same. The letter's vibration is like a frequency. It's there, available, but each person tunes into it uniquely based on their history, experiences, and above all, the rest of their name. This means the letter may represent the same energetic field, but the nuances, dominant strengths, and challenges vary greatly from one individual to another. Think of your name as a song. The first letter sets the initial tone, but it's the combination of all the notes that defines the complete melody. Your second, third, fourth name even, the nicknames you're frequently called all, contribute to forming the vibrational field you project into the world. In fact, the sound of letters repeatedly spoken energetically influences your identity. That's why it's common for people to enter new phases in life when they start being called something different, even subtly. This isn't coincidence, it's frequency. Beyond the letters, other equally powerful factors shape your energy. One of them is your birth date, which in Buddhist wisdom and also in numerology represents karmic portals, soul lessons, and inherited energetic patterns. Your birth date influences your life mission, your points of balance, and even the lessons you repeatedly attract. When we combine the initial letter with the full name and birth date, we start to form a true energetic map of your essence, a compass for understanding who you are and where you're being called to evolve. So, if you felt some interpretations here resonated deeply with you and others not so much, that's normal. The letter's energy is present, yes, but how it manifests in you is absolutely unique. You're not just a letter. You're a complex, sacred, and ever-moving whole. And perhaps the greatest gift this video can give you is exactly this: the awareness that your name carries a message, but it's you who chooses how to live that story. Now, with more clarity, more purpose, and much more respect for who you truly are, if you've made it this far, it's because something inside you felt there was an important message in this content, and there is. The way you relate to your name, your letters, your identity, says a lot about the level of consciousness you're reaching. Many live their entire lives without ever asking why they are the way they are. You didn't. You went beyond the surface, and that alone puts you in a rare group, the group of people seeking to understand themselves more deeply. What you heard here isn't magic or superstition. It's energy, vibration, millennial wisdom that sees the human being as part of a much larger system where nothing is by chance, even the letter of your name. This is the invitation Buddhist teachings offer us: to observe the details, find meaning in what seemed random, value what's always been there, but that you only now manage to see with new eyes. And from this new perspective, to live with more purpose, more consciousness, and more connection. Remember, everything said here is a seed, a key, a spark. The true transformation only happens when you take this awareness and apply it to your life and your decisions, your relationships, the way you see yourself. Now that you know what energy vibrates in your initial letter, use it as a guide. Reflect on the points that resonated most. Come back if you want to listen again. Each time you listen with more attention, a new layer reveals itself. That's growth. That's awakening. And if this content touched you in any way, if you felt you learned something new about yourself or someone you love, I ask you, hit the like button on this video. It helps the channel grow and deliver content like this to others also seeking self-knowledge. And if you're not subscribed yet, subscribe now. Here, we don't talk about magic formulas. We talk about consciousness, evolution, truth, and that's the kind of journey that only gets better when you walk it with others. Also, take a moment to tell me in the comments, what's your letter and what surprised you most about it? Did you relate? Did you already feel something similar and now manage to put a name to it? Your comment not only helps me understand what's reaching you, but also inspires others who come across it. You could be the mirror someone needs to start their own awakening process. And that in itself is already a way to contribute to the world. Thank you for staying with me until the end. The simple fact that you stopped to look within already puts you in tune with what truly matters. May your name continue to be not just an external identifier, but a symbol of your inner journey. May each letter echo your essence, and may you have the courage to live up to the energy you carry. I'll see you in the next video with more truth, more wisdom, and more consciousness. Until then.